Black Salt's indie horror game Dredge is a game I enjoyed, but have mostly forgotten. I did like it, don't get me wrong, but since setting my controller down, the infested waters and sinister characters have mostly receded in my memory. But I do think about it. I think about the name, that singular word, dredge. It's perfect. It's dark, it's evocative, and it's unsettling. Most impressive of all might be its onomatopoeic resonance. It's easy to misread the word, or mishear it, as dread. The energy and atmosphere of the game are encapsulated in one syllable. It fits the game thematically and atmospherically. The word dredge, as it appears in the dictionary, has multiple meanings, each evoking a similar act. As a noun, it is the name given to a tool or ship used to recover objects from the depths of a body of water. In the game, you're tasked with fishing, but also in recovering salvage from the sea floor. But the things found in the waters of the archipelago Greater Marrow are things that should not be taken from their murky home. I made 2 trips on my first day, catching cheap fish, mackerels, gulf flounders and the like. Inoffensive and unexciting. I was on a later fishing trip, as the music grew tense and the sun dipped in the sky, that the dread set in. I'd been warned about the nights of Marrow's waters, but with space left in my storage, I saw that one last catch. It wasn't a difficult catch, but all the same it had a cost. It was this brown, bulbous, terrible thing. It was horrific to look at, visually pungent. I was scared by its appearance and saddened too. It looked pained, like it knew it shouldn't exist. And there was something else I felt. Regret. I shouldn't have stayed out at night. I shouldn't have been greedy. I should have left it down below. I should have left it hidden. Which brings me to another definition of dredge. The verb. To dredge something, like its tool name, is to drag the bed of a body of water. But it's as well known for its more personal application. To dredge something is to address, reveal, or acknowledge something that is uncomfortable, inconvenient, or unwanted. The aberrations of Greater Marrow instill discomfort. They fetch a high price, but their presence it's the first indication we receive that the waters perhaps don't want to be scoured. It's easier, more comfortable to sail in the safety of daylight. But this definition isn't about fish. It's about our reality. Our uncomfortable experiences pockmarked with inconvenient truths, painful memories, and things we might prefer to tuck away in a shady corner. It is revealed over the course of 2 endings to Dredge that our fisherman is in fact responsible for the terrors tangled in his net that he profiteers from. Prior to the start of the game, the fisherman hoisted up an ancient casket, and against the protests of his wife Julie, he opened it. A thick fog descended on the islands, and a gargantuan sea creature attacked their boat, killing Julie. However, when we take control of our protagonist, he has no memory of these events. He's an amnesiac, with no recollection of his actions that incited the narrative of the game. The past is hidden. The memories are just too painful. He's afraid and he cannot face them. In the end, the only thing that can help him is to pull them from the sea. There are secrets in the waters of Greater Marrow, old things that wish not to be disturbed, vestiges of the past, ancient horrors impossible to fathom. But there's also the fisherman's past, deeply personal memories of love and hurt. Julie is buried at sea, her body lies beneath the waves, but her memory bobs on the surface in tidy bottles, just within the grasp of her haunted lover. When I think of memories lost at sea, games like BioShock come to mind, or The Lonely Asylum of Shutter Island. They too use water to signify the loss of memory. Surrounded by the depths, it's easy to lose part of ourselves, crucial pieces of our being, events that made us who we are. Repressed memory has a little basis in psychiatric study, it's largely been discredited. But that doesn't matter to the fisherman. And maybe we should think more about it, not Not psychologically, but anthropologically. So often we write of the events pushed down into the recesses of our tangled neurons, a pseudoscientific phenomenon that's just so compelling. But why? Why do we need to write about forgetting? Why do we find it so curious to have a character unable to peer into the past? Are there really things back there that we cannot bear to face? Like the use of our fragile ship to dredge the depths, Lucas Pope presents us with another tool for excavation in his 2018 game, Return of the Obra Dinn. You play as an investigator for the East India Company tasked with determining what has happened to the Obra Dinn. It's appeared offshore, and the people named on the manifest are not there. You arrive on the ship, the sound of waves and creaking timber, and just one other man piloting your rowboat. With nobody alive to answer your questions, you take an eerie, occult watch from a chest and explore the ship. The peculiar thing about this watch is its ability to peer into the past. Use it on a body and it will give you a snapshot, a moment frozen in time. This person is dead. This is what it looked like. That watch, in a way, is a dredge, as a noun. It's a tool used to excavate the past, to bring to light moments of anguish and violence, and to study them, jot them down. The past is once again delivered, uncomfortably and inconveniently, from the waters. The first moment you see is a murder. It seems like a mutiny, and seems like this is the answer. This is what happened to the Obra Dinn. I'm sure as I explore the ship further, I'll know why they killed their leader. Could be anything. Perhaps they found bountiful treasures and couldn't decide how to split them. Perhaps the mutineers were led by a figure hell-bent on revenge against Captain Witterell. Maybe Captain Witterell was a good man before he left, but the isolation of the sea drove him to tyranny. Maybe he worked the men too hard, and they could take no more. Or maybe the woman quietly laid to rest in the captain's quarters was loved too much by another man. Something drove these men to violence. Love or hatred, honor or corruption. It could be anything. After exiting what I suppose is the tutorial area of the Obra Dinn, this is what we see. Splintered wood, fear, crushed limbs, blood, and the gargantuan tentacles of a beast we do not know or understand. This is the past we must investigate. What has happened? Why is it here? And what did they do to deserve this? Memories like these are perhaps better left at sea. Why do we need to address these things? The men are gone. Their widows would take no comfort in their dead husbands' cries for mercy. Why do we have to take this cursed watch and see this? Unfortunately, that is our job. We investigate, we document, and we try not to think of the souls less fortunate than ourselves. The game is excellent, and the journey of piecing together the fragmentary and non-linear narrative is incredibly rewarding, so I won't tell you what happened. But what we do as a player is to look for the truth. Much like the crew of the Obra Dinn, we dredge. We write in our ledger the names, positions, and details of their deaths. Here are the answers, we say. Here there be monsters. That phrase, "here there be monsters," was a piece of the lexicon of medieval cartography. Explorers of the oceans and coasts would draw fantastical serpents, seductive mermaids, and tentacle horrors to indicate danger in unexplored regions. Here there be monsters wasn't necessarily a marker of a leviathan's hunting ground. It was an indicating of potential danger. We have not been here. We do not know what you will find. It's an interesting thing that this was the norm. Maps in a video game will use a veil, like fog or a general opacity, to indicate that you have not seen what this area of the map has to offer. The Civilization games can nod to this, but For the most part, the unexplored regions of a map are neutral. There's little indication of what may lay ahead. Perhaps a new challenge, an overleveled threat, or a new boon. But in these maps of old, the assumption was the waters that stretch out beyond the horizon are hostile. The Kraken, like the one that entered so many names in our ledger, is the most famous creature to grace the coastlines of medieval maps. Originating in Scandinavian folklore, the legends speak of tentacles capable of sinking the grandest ships. Sailors armed with spears could do little more than cower when faced with the unholy wrath of this behemoth. This thing of the deep, a great immenseness unbridled in its rage. Of course, the Kraken was a fabrication. It's most likely the case that the remains of giant squids were found washed to the shores of Norse settlements and imaginations ran wild. Could you blame them? It's a giant squid. To them it must have been the most awe-inspiring thing imaginable. As its size dwarfed their measly longships, the giant squid can reach up to 43 feet long. Compared to their own ships, it must have been... Oh. I expected the scale to be different. I expected the Norse explorers to be dwarfed by the giant squid. I'm sure it's still a sight to behold, but the Kraken, the images that come to mind are those of biblical, apocalyptic, hopeless fights with cannons, cutlasses, and salt-washed grit. I'm being unfair though. Sure, the giant squid couldn't sink the Black Pearl. But in a time when losing sight of land can lead to a slow, laborious death at sea, I can understand why one would grow fanatic. The sea, even at its surface, is a place of anxiety, its vastness unknown, untamed, and temperamental. When these maps were made, it did not belong to us. When we do not know what we venture into, it's safest to assume that we are venturing into danger. Perhaps it was safer to assume the presence of untold things that claim the waters. Things we dare not contend with. Watch the waves carefully, because here there be monsters. The concept that the ocean is host to unspeakable terrors that dwarf our sense of scale isn't obscure. It crops up on maps, in religious texts, and in fiction. And it's difficult to speak about it without mentioning H.P. Lovecraft. The writings of Lovecraft are obsessed with narrators facing truths that they cannot comprehend or accept. The term existential horror in relation to H.P. Lovecraft is the horror that we, in truth, are insignificant and blind to the universe. To come to know the truth of our reality would drive us to madness. Horror, to H.P. Lovecraft, is stated as such. The most merciful thing in this world, I think, is the inability of the human mind to correlate all its contents. We live on a placid island of ignorance, in the midst of black seas of infinity, and it was not meant that we should voyage far. We are not meant to know the truth. His writings have defined existential horror as well as the genre of cosmic horror. But as much as Lovecraft writes of horrors amid the stars, he is equally obsessive of the things that lurk beneath the waves. The novella, Shadow over Innsmouth, is a perfect example, and speaks to this anxiety, both in the presentation of ancient unknown horrors, as well as the personal fears of the narrator's own history. We open with the narrator writing an address of his experiences in Innsmouth, a small, dilapidated fishing town in Massachusetts. Dredge obviously comes to mind. At the time of writing, an inquest and conspiratory cover-up is being conducted over the strange goings-on. The narrator has two tools at his disposal to address the past: a typewriter and a pistol. The town of Innsmouth, when reduced to vocabulary, is addressed as a whisper. There is one bus route that runs through it to Arkham, but it's not recommended. The people of Innsmouth have a queer, unsettling look. Flat heads, unblinking eyes, and a stench of rotting fish. Something horrible is polluting the town. its people, and its reputation. The unfortunate soul we follow in the novella finds himself curious about the history of the town. Knowing he will pass through its border, he visits a museum and later speaks to a man named Zadok. Zadok does not have the Innsmouth look or stench, but he's odd in his own way. He's reluctant to speak, but when he does, he reveals the history of this coastal settlement. He dredges up the past. Innsmouth is home to a terrible secret. In exchange for fish and gold, the ancestors of Innsmouth entered into a pact with the mortal fish creatures known as the Deep Ones. The esoteric Order of Dagon is at work here, a terrible cult whose machinations aim to free Cthulhu and bring about the end times. Horrific fish creatures plotting to free their master is scary, yes. But things are a little worse. You see, in exchange for the bounties given to Innsmouth, they agreed to breed with the Deep Ones. The offensive creatures, webbed and scaled, infested not only the waters of Massachusetts, not just the air with their rotten stench, but into the bloodlines of the town, into their DNA. The queer Innsmouth look, as it's called, is a result of the ancient eldritch DNA commingling with our human genes, infantile by comparison. An Innsmouthite is born with a human appearance, normal nose, ears, fingers each keeping to themselves. But as they get older, as they venture into the latter years of their 20s, change begins. The death stench creeps in, and eventually, the call of the sea comes to a head. Their humanity, sloughed off like reptilian scales, they become a Deep One. Immortal, but an aberration. Our protagonist reveals the truth to us, and confesses that he too, through distant relation, is born of Innsmouth. The change is starting in him. He hears the waters calling from the left, the pistol from the right. His genealogy, warped and otherworldly, was unknown to him until he reached that festering place. His past trudges out of the dark sea and drags him into its inky recesses. The past is unfair. It could have stayed there, deep down where it would never be seen. Memory, family, the trauma of past generations change this man. Generational trauma, family secrets, all of these pieces of history, they're not his fault. He shouldn't have to pay for the mistakes that he did not make. But still, the death stench creeps in. Few artists unsettle my stomach quite like Junji Ito. That sounds like a criticism, but it's not. It's intentional on his part. The Japanese manga artist explores body horror in ways that would make Cronenberg sick. He writes of bodies contorted and twisted into spirals, bones snapped, faces agonized. He draws human-shaped holes that draw you in, slowly warping your form to monstrosity, and balloons that look just a bit too much like you. His piece that I want to dig into is his 2-volume horror manga, Gyo. Gyo tells the story of a young man, Tadashi, and his girlfriend, Kaori. Kaori has a hypersensitive nose and cannot handle foul smells. Her name means fragrant. Ito is cruel that way. When vacationing on Okinawa, the couple come across a thing that should not be. There's a fish there, with legs. Like the aberrations in Dredge, it breeds disgust. This thing is not like the others. It's wrong. Kaori hates it most of all. Her sensitivity to smell starts driving her mad, and she begs Tadashi to get rid of it. He seals it in a plastic bag to contain the smell. But the fish, with no business scuttling about on land, escapes. In the following chapters, legged fish invade Okinawa. The smell surrounds them, and a great white shark chases them through their home, in a terrifying spectacle of an apex predator hunting them in a place where they should be safe. The things that should be contained to the sea are invading the safety of Okinawa. These legged fish terrorize our characters by going to a place that they do not belong, in being granted the ability to walk, like the deep ones of Innsmouth, they can dredge without our control. But unlike the young man of Lovecraft's story, we are not entirely without blame. It's revealed later in the book that these fish are not just dead. Their corpses are being piloted by their legs, and the stench is not coming from their decomposing flesh. The legs and the stench are of human origin. Turns out that during World War II, the Japanese military were experimenting with a biological weapon. The stench is a byproduct of an infection intended to cripple enemy forces. Released as a gas, it's then used to fuel mechanical legs to carry corpses to enemy bases and infect them. The results are horrifying. These ungodly weapons rested at the bottom of the sea. The waves masked the sins of one of the ugliest periods of modern history. The memory of cruelty and callous merciless towards the other were repressed. Buried amid wreckage on the seabed was a thing that the populace need not know. We don't have to address the ugliest part of humanity. They can lie, the festering guilt can remain there, unremembered. That is until it rears its head. The past, be it the sins of war, terrible tragedy, or our family tree, all of these things can remain in the periphery until they cannot. The things we are and the things we do, they get dredged. It's hard, it's uncomfortable, and it's inconvenient. The fisherman of Dredge has buried his wife and his sins at sea. It is his curiosity that unearthed the holy curse. His wife died as a result, and as such, the people of Greater Marrow have to suffer. When he dredges the outcomes of his action from the deep. The cracked skin, gnarled teeth, and haunted eyes are testaments to his regret. His guilt and the memories are also lost at sea. The messages from his wife reel him in, slowly, back to reality. Much like the Okinawans of Gyo, the people of Greater Marrow did nothing to deserve the invasion of horrific fish. Like our narrator in The Shadow over Innsmouth, it's family ties that call the player to delve into the sea. And like the explorers of antiquity, and the poor souls aboard the Obra Dinn, there are dangers lurking in the water, in our fears, and in the thrashing, tumultuous sea of our neurochemistry. We bury dark, unhappy things at sea. Whether we want them to or not, they want to be found. They want to be remembered.